Hello and welcome to Continuing Clockwise, a channel about games, gamers, and gaming. I'm Chad. So as you may remember, a few weeks ago, I talked about my campaign. So we spent an episode talking about my prep for a campaign, and then we debriefed the following session. For this episode, I want to talk about a session I just had. So this is the second session that I DM'd since the prep session. And that's what we're going to go into today. Because we did so much work of prep before, I didn't have to do that much extra prep. One of the things I did do was email my players a list of the remaining milestones in the campaign. I've always been a fan of milestone progression, so I've never awarded experience points. But one of the things experience points does allow you to do is that it incentivizes killing monsters and getting their treasure, which is fun. That's what makes the game fun. When you're using milestones, what the players should be doing is a little less clear. Mostly, that's not a problem. I really wanted to make the remaining elements of the campaign clear so they would know what to do. So they have 4 things left. The first one is to get the judge's name. So as you probably remember, the judge is the main antagonist for this campaign, and I have a little bit of a Rumpelstiltskin thing happening with him. The second thing is to kill the judge, using his name to depower him. The third remaining milestone is to get all of the components of the ritual to Vizeron, and that's the ritual that will summon all of the demon lords into one place. They'll fight each other. And then the fourth milestone is that then the player characters will kill the remaining demon lord. As I mentioned before, a lot of this campaign is rooted in Out of the Abyss, though there's a lot of my own content, especially lately, that I've been using. The party recently actually joined forces with the judge in a way to try to curry his favor so they could have better access to his base. The thinking was, with better access, more trust, they would have an easier time of stealing his grimoire, which is one of the final pieces for that ritual that they need to get back to Vizeron. The judge then sent them on a mission to steal a Void Dragon's egg. So they successfully did that. They took the egg, they teleported away, they escaped, and the dragon followed them, however. So at the end of the last session, the dragon and the player characters were fighting in a city. Also in the last session, the party was a little underpowered because 2 of the players were missing. So by the end of the session, which ended mid-combat, we had 2 of them out of the picture altogether just because the players weren't there. Gimlet, so as you might remember, Gimlet is the dwarven thief. He had been driven permanently insane. Permanently, there's a way to cure that, just a greater restoration spell, but otherwise permanently. Arinya, the tiefling bard, was in pretty good shape. Thalia, the fighter, was suffering from the fear effect also, though not the permanent kind. So last session started with, first off, all the players were there. So there was a lot of discussion to get everyone aligned about what the tactics were. What strategy were they going to be following here? Would they try to kill the dragon? Would they, try to go after the judge? What were they going to do? Now, technically, this was all happening mid-combat, during a 6-second round. So as a DM, I was getting a little impatient with that. But the group, just needed some time to talk about it. Just as human beings, they needed time to talk. And so one of the things I've learned as a DM is sometimes you just got to let the players talk. And so even though I tried to nudge them forward as best I could, ultimately, they were ready when they were ready. So they hatched a plan to negotiate with the dragon. Arinya had the actual egg herself, and so she pulled out the egg and used that as a negotiating tactic with the dragon. So she had it, and it was a scene that was a little reminiscent from the end of Alien. So if you remember that movie, Sigourney Weaver has this flamethrower, and she's in this confrontation with the alien brood mother who's laid all these eggs. And so Sigourney Weaver's character, Ripley, is threatening to just burn all the eggs, and that causes the alien mother to just pause. So similarly, Arinya had the egg, and just the threat of being able to injure the egg or destroy the egg was enough to calm the dragon down and to at least give them some time to negotiate. Frictor, the dwarven cleric, created a second illusory dragon egg. So that gave them a little additional leverage with the dragon. They were able to give her one of her eggs back, and then still she thought that there was a second egg that they had gotten a hold of somehow, so thus keeping her in connection and in the conversation. So during that discussion where they explained to her about the judge and actually were honest that the judge was the one who put them up to it. Meanwhile, the rest of the party was hiding in a nearby building, and Ariana, the druid, was casting Windwalk. So Windwalk is a high-level druid spell that lets up to, I think, like 10 characters or something turn into wind. Gives them an incredibly high fly speed. It's really cool. So, during the negotiation, the Windwalk was being cast. It takes a minute to cast, and it all worked, essentially. So they turned into wind. They told the dragon that the judge was their true enemy. She really wasn't satisfied with that. I think she was still pretty angry. That they just escaped. So not only did they escape, they proceeded directly to return to her lair, which they had mostly cleared the first time. And they had a good head start with her because their fly speed under the effects of the Windwalk spell was really fast. It's like 300 feet per turn or something. So extraordinarily fast. So they went back, The dragon already thought they had a second egg, but now they made that true. As you may remember, I was using the Book of Lairs from Kobold Press. And so I just gave them the treasure right out of there. And as part of that, there's a horde golem out of the Tome of Beasts. They're defending the best treasure. It was a little tricky for me because I had not reviewed that monster first. And so usually I like to do that when I see that a combat's coming. And I had never even looked at that stat block. That was a little bit of shame on me. I should have done that. So, and some of the abilities, one of the abilities in particular was a little confusing for me, especially on the fly. But, a lot of that is just part of being a dungeon master. You just need to make quick decisions. And so that's what I did. And the combat went really well. I thought they were appropriately scared, but really it was fun combat all around. And they got a lot of really good loot from there. So, for example, there's a +3 shield, which I think is their first +3 magic item of any kind. Again, they're level 14, so it's time for that. After all of that stuff at the lair was resolved, and they got the treasure and they killed the monster, they didn't want to linger too long because they figured the dragon would be returning pretty quickly. So they went back to Skyreach Castle. So Skyreach Castle was the flying castle out of the back of Hoard of the Dragon Queen, which I let them use as their home base for most of this campaign. Coincidentally to all this, I just saw Infinity War, so that recent Avengers movie, the night before this session. And so I was really inspired by the way Thanos was established early. I won't spoil any specifics in that, but just to know that like in the very first scene of the movie, we see Thanos, who we didn't really know before. If you guys remember that movie, he was well established as a bad villain that we hated because he killed a character that we liked. So I was really thinking about that and how I could make the judge more vicious. This also reminds me of how Negan from The Walking Dead was introduced. So as you remember, the first time he actually appears in the show, he kills 2 characters that we really adore. And so we know as an audience, and of course as the characters, we know that we hate him. And this is only going to end when, with the end of these characters. I don't even know if that's true, in the stories. So there's no spoiler there. I honestly don't know. But, you just kind of feel like that's the way it's going to go. So using that inspiration in my campaign, once the players returned home to Skyreach, it's a pretty populated place. They've had a lot of people move in. They have alchemists and they have wizards and whatever. There's some ogres living there doing security. So I had a group of people kind of gathered at one particular part, and I really had this unfold as the characters, went to go see what was happening. And what they found was that Frictor's brother, Grumlor, who's been an established non-player character, was lying there, murdered, had he been killed by the judge. And the judge had just been there, had just done this not long before. So that really put the hooks in the player characters. This was something I thought of the morning before the game. As I've mentioned before, my best ideas always come right before the game starts. So I didn't do a lot of thinking, a lot of prep around this. And one of the things that I forgot was that there is a temple for the Raven Queen on Skyreach Castle. And I've established that part of why they're there, part of the benefits to the player characters is they can use them for healing spells and presumably raise dead. So, immediately the players were like, oh yeah, we should, that's okay. We can just have Grumlor raised. I had to think fast. I didn't want to take that from them. It was something I'd established. I wanted to stay consistent. I wanted to reinvest in existing ideas, which, as you may remember from a few videos ago, that's one of my main principles when I'm running a game. I also had to pull out my notes. So I was flipping through my notebook, and I'll show those here. What were those characters' names and who were they? And just, which was fine. Another thing that's important is, for my campaign, is that raise dead spells are available, but they're not that easy. It's not just about casting a spell and the status quo returning to normal. There's always a cost. There's always a change. There's always a price, even if it's a non-player character. This has been inspired by, there's a scene in Conan the Barbarian, the movie, the John Milius movie, with Arnold Schwarzenegger as Conan, where Conan was severely injured. He'd actually been crucified by Thulsa Doom, the antagonist of that movie. And his friends had saved him, but he was so severely injured that they were using magic to try to heal him so that he could recover. And, in the night, these spirits came and tried to take him from our world. And his girlfriend, Valeria, defended him. And there was this idea that, the spirits did not give up easily, and there was a price. She had sworn that she would essentially pay the price required for Conan to be healed and to stay alive. And she did. Later on, she was killed. That was essentially her payment. For saving Conan. And so that was something I really liked. There was a feeling I like about that element. Even though Conan wasn't dead, it's the same idea. As we're playing this out, again, this was real time. This part was all improv during the game. I was remembering that Frictor, whose brother it was, had already been raised once. He already owed a debt to the Raven Queen. So he couldn't be the one really to pay the price for his brother. Now, Gimlet however, was something else. For one thing, that Gimlet was the one who had rescued Rend. And so the reason the judge had killed Grumlor was even the scales. They had taken Rend, so he took Grumlor. That was the logic I'd said. And really, it was Gimlet who was responsible for that. So as part of the ritual, I had the Raven Queen transform Gimlet into a Revenant. Now, there are rules for that in the Unearthed Arcana that came out right around the time the Curse of Strahd super module, whatever it was released. And I actually have a character in a Curse of Strahd campaign who became a Revenant after he was killed during a particularly tough combat. So that was another thing that's kind of been on my mind about those rules are pretty fun. They work. They didn't, I don't think my character is particularly overbalanced. All the better, Gimlet's player is the DM for that setting. So he has seen a Revenant in action. And I had a sense that he would go for it. So the player's name is Galen. He goes by ZobMe on Twitch and on Twitter, ZOBMIE. I'll actually leave a note for who he is in the notes section. Anyway, so I had a sense that he would go for it. And so I made it really explicit for in character that he had this was an opt-in. Before the transformation happened, Gimlet had to say that 3 times. I made him say it 3 times. That he was willing to accept the consequences and that he understood the consequences were going to be permanent and they were going to be a big deal. I didn't want to screw anybody over. Even though I had a high confidence that this player would go for it, as a DM, you have to be sensitive about transforming a player's character, without their consent. Frankly, that's a way to kind of take someone's fun away. Or in this case, which I think is really happening, it's a great way to ratchet up the fun. So that's part of knowing your table, knowing your players, having your pulse on the room. So just, my advice in that case would be, be a little careful with that, but don't be afraid of it either. So now we have a Dwarf Revenant Thief. And part of a Revenant's thing is that they only have 1 more year to complete their final quest. And once their final quest is finished, they cease to exist, or, they pass away in a more permanent way. And so his mission is to, kill the judge and destroy the judge's legacy. And the translation for destroying the judge's legacy is to send those demon lords back to their homes. Send them, kill them, whatever. Because that was the one thing in this campaign that the judge had been successful at. He'd failed at summoning Tiamat. He was still working to summon the elemental gods, but he had summoned these demon lords. So by reversing that, it'll be the final defeat for the judge. The players then had 1 more discussion about what to do next, what their strategy was, and they decided to take Rend home and to learn what the judge's name was from Rend's elders. That was something I'd established a few weeks ago as well. And I think that was partially driven by that email I'd sent, where I was really clear about what the milestones were. In Tomb of Annihilation, there's a section where some Aarakocra live, and there's their settlement. It's the monastery where many of them live. And I had looked at that. I had previewed it. And I had added the Peninsula of Chult to my campaign setting. So even though I'm not in the Forgotten Realms, I just kind of added this peninsula. So I did have a sense. I just hadn't really thought it through deeply, which was okay. And actually, during this session, this was one of the several times during this session, because it was a really dynamic session, where as the players were starting to make decisions, as they were having their discussions, I used that time to get a few steps ahead of them. So, while they were talking about going to Ren's home, while they were talking about going to Chult, I grabbed the book and I opened it up and I started to read through it and so at least I had a few minutes head start on them. So the group teleported to Ren's home, right into his house, and they met his mother. And I used Xanathar's Guide to Everything to come up with Ren's mother's name. It's Mavis. Her name is Mavis. And then Mavis took them to the monastery to meet the main elder of that settlement. And the elder, who is named in the module, and I use that name, and I can't remember what it is right now. Anyway, made it really clear that she didn't want the judge to find out who had told what the judge's name was to the players. The judge would want revenge. That is a secret. He does not want people to know. He would remember that. And the name I used just came directly from the Tome of Beasts. There's a devil in there that is a pretty good fit, has been a really good fit. So I've been using his stats. Totavilius is his name. And so I just used that, Totavilius, as the judge's name. I kind of was hoping to think of something a little more clever, but it's fine. It was okay. You can't always knock it out of the park with every single phase of every single idea. So I think that's fine. I also added the benefit that anyone who knows the judge's true name can use it once per day to essentially cast command on him. It's a spell-like effect of using command. So I was just kind of thinking of, when your mother uses your middle name or something, or that tone of voice with you, it's like a command, like you're just compelled to obey. Now the judge will get a saving throw, so it's not a guarantee, but at least it gives them a fun advantage over him, which I think will be cool. And then so that was the end of the session. They'd hit another milestone, and So they'll be level 15 next time. That level 14 was pretty quick, but again, it's the end of the campaign, so things are happening quickly now. I believe they're going to deliver that egg to the judge, and then when his guard is down, I think they're going to try to gank him. So, it's a good plan. It's a fun plan. I like it a lot. Having said that, what they don't know, they haven't figured out yet, is that the judge has been scrying on them routinely. So the judge has a really good idea of what the plan was. That was part of why they knew that they were responsible for stealing Rend and what led to Grumlor's death in the first place. So as I'm thinking about how to prep for the next session, I think the judge won't be eager to engage them in direct combat. He knows they have their name. I could have the judge screw with those Aarakocra, but I don't think I will. I think I'll hold off on that, maybe use it as a threat. So I'll have the judge send his lieutenants. So I've been using the main villains from Princes of the Apocalypse. What I'm thinking is I'll use one or two of those, maybe Vanifer and I think Gar is the water one. So I think I'll have those engage. And then I need to think about the combat with the judge, of course. I've been working on his lower powered. I have that pretty ready to go, but I want the setting to be fun and exciting. And then I need to look over the Princes of the Apocalypse dungeon. I've been using that as the judge's home, so I could see some other additional combats happening if there's some running combats or something. One thing I'm finding is that it's really difficult to manage the challenge for encounters at level 15. The monsters at this level are super powerful and all this fidgety stuff that it just seems to me could really easily, TPK the party without trying too hard. At the same time, it's really tricky because the players have all this crazy stuff too. So, one thing I've just decided is just to go for it. Just have the monsters be tough. And by starting there with the monsters being tough is that I can dial them back pretty easily. I can just stop using those special abilities, or I can just overlook a special ability. I can give them fewer hit points along the way. Yeah, there's a lot of little things you can do there. Versus it's harder for me to make an encounter more difficult if it's going too quickly. And then I still need to think through about how that ritual with Vizeron will work. Specifically, where is it going to happen? In Out of the Abyss, it takes place in Menzo Berdanzan, or that's where Vizeron wants to do it anyway. I really haven't introduced that part of it into this campaign, and I don't plan to, but I do need to think of another location. And maybe it'll just be another part of the Underdark. No big deal. I also want to pick which Demon Lord will be the last survivor, so that I can be really familiar with their abilities and can make that combat really fun as well. That won't happen next session. It might happen the following session. I think we've got probably more likely 3 sessions left in this campaign. It could extend out, but I have a sense. So that's it. So what do you guys think? What questions do you have? What do you think of my ideas for my last session? Do you have any ideas for what I should do next? How I should handle the Demon Lords? How did it work for you? Those of you who have run Out of the Abyss, how did those Demon Lord combats work? Those of you who have run long campaigns and wrapped them up, especially, but not only limited to 5th edition. How did that go for you? How fun was it? What did you learn that you could maybe teach me as I'm lurching into the end of this campaign? I would love to hear your feedback in the comments. If you enjoyed this video, please click the like button and consider subscribing to my channel. I would really appreciate it. Until next week, happy gaming.